Okay, I'm going to minister to you today out of Psalm 18. And I did a teaching on this a couple years ago, and I focused on one part of it quite a bit in that teaching. And in fact, I don't even think I got to the end of it, which is where I'm going to put most of the focus today. But I'm going to start in the beginning of it, and I'm going to read all of it because it's really, really good, and we'll touch on the things that I taught on the last time that I did it. But we'll just kind of touch on them and go on through it till we get to the end part. But you know, I just feel like God has really been doing some things, and some things for us have been changing, and I just feel like there's so much in this psalm that we can learn and that we can live by and that we can understand what God's wanting to do. So if you start in Psalm 18, verse 1, I love you fervently and devotedly, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God, my keen and firm strength, in whom I shall trust and take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my high tower. I will call upon the Lord who is to be praised. So shall I be saved from my enemies. And I'm going to stop there for a minute. You realize that anytime we go to God for anything, whether it be in prayer, whether it be in praise, whether it be, to do warfare, whatever it might be, this is how it needs to start. It needs to start by exalting him, telling him how great he is, how good he is, and then you need to know in there that he can and will and is ready to save you from your enemies. And if you will start seeking him with that mindset, instead of, a lot of times you hear pitiful songs, pitiful prayers, pitiful warfare, like, oh, I'm so pitiful and I'm so this, and why is this happening to me? And God, why are you allowing this? And God, I don't understand. And, that's not telling him and giving him the place of honor that he deserves. And we need to start out by exclaiming to the enemies. We have that saying, Sharon was really stuck on it a while back. Stop telling God how big your problem is and start telling your problem how big your God is. And that's what David's doing here. I think this was David. That's what David's doing here. Is if you ever watch David, he does that a lot. Sometimes he starts out, poor, pitiful me, but almost every single psalm that he writes, he starts exalting God. He either does it in the beginning and then goes into the poor, pitiful me and then does it at the end again, or he starts out in the poor, pitiful me, but he ends up exalting God and telling him who he is. But I think that last line is, I will call upon the Lord who is to be praised, so shall I be saved from my enemies. You have to know going in that he wants to save you from your enemies. You can't go in thinking that it might be God doing it, or that, this time he might not do it, or this time I've screwed up too bad and he's just not going to save me this time. You have to go into it knowing that he will save you from your enemies. Now, you can't just go out there and live your life however you want to and do whatever you want every day, and then all of a sudden an enemy comes upon you, and so now you decide, okay, God, just save me from my enemies, because that's what you do. It doesn't work that way. You have to be in connection with him, and you have to be doing things to get free from those enemies the way that he's saying to do it, or you're probably not going to get free from the enemies. And I'll just add here, I hear a lot of people say like that God removes his protection from you, and that's how the enemies get to you, or he allows the enemies in to get to you. That I don't see it that way. How I see it is God, is it in Corinthians, that scripture we always talk about, says he makes a way of escape in every situation. So in every situation, he has a way for you to get out of that. And in every situation, he has a place of protection for you in that situation. If you listen to him and you do what he says, then you're under that protection. The minute you don't do it, it's not like here's his protection and he removes it. It's here's his protection. You moved out from underneath of it. And it's still here. God never goes back on his word. He always keeps his side of the covenant. So if you find yourself out here where there's no protection, then you better start asking him, where did I move out of your protection? Because I know you didn't remove it. That's not who you are. If you put that protection there, you'll keep it there. And so then you have to move back under to where he is. And it reminds me of that vision God gave me way back when I first started about the big arena, and the light was in the center, and he was the light. And every time I would see like people out there or situations going on, and I would step out of the light to try to fight the enemy, and like the minute I stepped out of the light, bunches of demons would jump on my back, and I did not have the strength, which the psalm goes into. I did not have the strength to fight them. But the minute I stepped back into the light, they wouldn't come into the light, and they couldn't touch me as long as I was in the light. And we as Christians, in America and around the world really need to understand this concept, because I think it's so funny that there's so much talk about the roar of the lion, and I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But and you guys are probably getting tired of hearing me talk about Irene Gleason, but her book come out right now that's called The Heart of the Lioness. So it's like there's so much going on with the lion thing right now. And when we just did that song, it says he's going to roar out of Zion. We're Zion now. We are his church now. We are his voice now. So for him to roar in the earth, that's going to come out of us. But the name of her book is The Roar of the Lioness, or The Heart of the Lioness. And she had such a faith and such a relationship with God that every time those enemies came at her, and the enemies that she faced were every bit as overwhelming and daunting as the enemies that are being faced in the Middle East right now and around the world right now. But she listened to God in every situation, and she heard what he said to do in every situation. And instead of going into a panic and into God has really been showing me about how we go into prayer in fear instead of in faith. You know, how many times does something happen and you immediately start going, praying in tongues, which, that's not the worst thing you can do. But that also, God showed me a long time ago, that is praying in fear instead of in faith. The first thing we need to do is get ourselves in peace, where our minds are shut up, we fight back that fear, where our hearts are at peace and at rest, so that we can hear what he has to say to get under that place of protection that he has for us. And I don't know that she knew for a fact that she was doing this, but when you read her story, that's what she did, because she would close her eyes, and there would be fear there, and she would say, Jesus, your face is the next thing I'm going to see. She really thought in those situations she was going to die. But as she's standing there in peace, because she believes that she's going to be with Jesus, she starts saying his name, and she starts declaring who he is. And in the midst of that, they couldn't touch her. She would stand there for a long time thinking, I wonder what it's going to feel like when they shoot me or they stick their bayonet in me. And pretty soon she'd open her eyes because nothing was happening. And they'd be standing there trying to shoot her or poke her with the thing, and they couldn't do it. And then that anger of the Lord, or whatever you call it, would come on her, and she'd be like, you get out of here. And they would run in fear. And she said, I don't even know what happened. I don't know what they saw. I don't know how it happened. But they would run away from her in fear because they saw God all over her. And I know it's because she got in that place of peace instead of like freaking out. She got in that place where his protection was, and she started declaring out of her mouth who he was. And we need Christians like that to stand up in this earth today. Like, we get so scared when we hear all of these stories of people killing Christians and martyring Christians and massacring Christians. That is not what this Bible says our God is. That is not who it says he is. He is way bigger than that. If you're in his place of protection, if you go out from under it, yes, they're going to be too strong for you, which we're going to read in here a little bit later. But if you're in his place of protection, what can the enemy do to him? We just sang a song. All the enemies are in his hands. All the enemies have to do what he says. So if we're doing what he says, they have to do what we say and what he says. Okay, we'll go on verse 4. And now this is going to go into, he's pretty much just declaring what his problem is. He's pretty much just making a statement. The cords and bands of death surrounded me, and the streams of ungodliness and the torrents of ruin terrified me. The cords of Sheol surrounded me, and the snares of death confronted me and came upon me. Okay, we read all of that like, oh yeah, that was terrible. Poor David. Doesn't the situations that he was in sound just like the situations that we hear today? People with swords, people trying to chase him down and kill him. This was every bit as daunting to him, every bit as fearful for him, every bit as scary for him as the things that are being faced in our world today. Like, enemies came with a sword wanting to kill him. Can you imagine what it must have been like to be in that cave? And when Saul came in, and he was close enough that David could cut off the skirt of his robe, and he's wanting to kill David. Can you imagine how your heart must have been beating and how your breath, and he's probably trying to not breathe because it probably was quiet in there, They didn't have like lights and stuff like we do now. It was probably really dark in there and quiet, and his heart was probably going 100 miles an hour. In my distress, I called upon the Lord and cried to my God. He heard my voice out of his temple, and my cry came from him into his ears. Then the earth quaked and rocked. Okay, what does any enemy have against a God who can make the earth quake and rock? The foundations also of the mountains trembled. They moved and were shaken because he was indignant and angry. There went up smoke from his nostrils, and lightning out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also and came down. What an awesome God, right? He bowed the heavens and came down because why? His people were in distress. We just sang it. You hear the cries of your people and you deliver them. That's the God that we serve. And he will bow the heavens to come down and deliver us. He bowed the heavens also and came down, and thick darkness was under his feet. He rode upon a cherub and flew swiftly. Yes, he sped on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his secret hiding place and his pavilion, and round about him were dark waters and thick clouds of the sky. And I just wrote down here, God hates injustice. And you know, we like to go around and saying that injustice is being done to us. But do you know what the real injustice is? When God looks down and sees his people in the bondage that they're in and oppressed by the enemy, when Jesus already paid the huge price that Jesus paid. Jesus is the one the injustice is being done to. Like, it's happening to us, but it's not supposed to be happening to us because it's unjust when Jesus already paid a price for us to be free, and we're still in this mess. And that's what makes God angry. That's what makes him bow the heavens and come down, because he hates the injustice of what he sees in his people when we're supposed to be free. Oh, just, ugh. And then 12 and 13, this is pretty much where I taught about out of last time. Out of the brightness before him there broke forth through his thick clouds hailstones and coals of fire. The Lord also thundered from the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice, and hailstones and coals of fire. And he sent out his arrows and scattered them, and he flashed forth lightnings and put them to rout, which that word means defeat. I had to look that up because I didn't know what it meant either. But what I taught out of that was, okay, so, you start out exalting God. You start out knowing that he can save you from your enemies. You look around, and there's a lot of enemies around, and you feel like you're in the cords of death, and all those things I just read are going on and on around you. And the first thing that God is going to do, which, we heard this taught so many times, when Jesus came, he didn't go to the Romans and say, you're having all these orgies, and you're having all these things, and you're murdering people, and you're greedy and all that. He didn't do that. The first thing he did was went to his people and said, you need to change. You're the ones that are my people. You are the ones that made covenant with me. You are the ones that said you would do this. And so I felt like God revealed to me that the hailstones are the hard truths. And that's when you find yourself in these situations, the first thing God is going to do is he's going to start giving you some hard truths about yourself. And he's going to say, part of the reason that you have these enemies is because you're doing this. Because here's my protection, and you're out over here somewhere trying to do this on your own. And he's going to give you those hard truths and those lightnings, and it's going to feel like a storm. It's going to feel like a torrent. It's going to feel like you're messed up. It's going to feel like a tornado's coming. It's going to feel like everything in your life. God always talks about himself like a wind. And I always think about having a table with all of my papers on my table in place exactly the way I want them, and the way I have everything planned out, and how I see my future, and how everything's going to happen. And all of a sudden, God opens the window, and there it all goes. And he's like, no, that's not my plan. Here's my plan. And see, that's what he does, is in the midst of that wind and that stuff, he speaks those things to you like, you thought, this is why I was having this problem. It was because so-and-so did this to me. And God's like, no, it's because you're doing this. You're thinking this. You're acting like this. You have unforgiveness in your heart. Whatever it might be, that is the hard truth that he wants to deal with you in. But that's the first thing he's going to do. And another thing that God has been speaking is, somebody asked me, they said, I can see like way out here where God wants me to be. And, most of us have like prophecies or something that somebody's given us, or words that they've given us, like that's way out there in the future, like this is going to happen, and it's big. And when you get it, it's like all exciting and everybody's happy and all of that. And then God gives you one step toward that. And this person asked me, why don't we just get all the steps in order? And I was like, I don't know. Well, as I prayed about it, I felt like God's going to give you the first step, and whatever you do with the first step is going to decide what the second step's going to be. Because, like, here's where he's taking you, and here's his 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He gives you the first one, and, that's not exactly what I wanted to do, and that really wasn't in my plan, so we step over here. Now guess what step 2 has to be in God's plan? Take you back to his step 1. And you'll never get off of his step 1 until you complete it. Once you complete his step 1, then he'll move you to step 2. And then what we like to do is we like to go back over here again. And then he'll be like, no, and he'll have to give you the steps to get back. And that's why it takes us so long to get to these places. But that's that same thing of moving out of his place of protection. It's like he's always trying to get us somewhere, and we're always wandering around. If we just do what he says, we'd get there a whole lot faster, right? So that's his hard truths, and that's part of the reason why it's hard to do his steps, because usually his steps are dealing with us. It's not us dealing with somebody out there. It's us dealing with ourselves first and with our religious system that's messed up second. Then he might let us go out and speak to other people. Okay. And then in verse 14, I just felt like the arrows, and he sent out his arrows and scattered them, and he flashed forth lightnings and put them to defeat, I'm going to say. That's just his word of truth. When he speaks his word of truth, it scatters the enemies. There's nothing the enemy can do once you get the truth of God in you. You get the truth of who he is and what he's saying to you, the enemy there's nothing he can do anymore. Like, it's done, Okay, 15. Then the beds of the sea appeared, and the foundations of the world were laid bare at your rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breaths of your nostrils. And, like, I get so much out of that verse, and, like, I've tried to tell people, and I'm not sure I make it understand, like, it goes off in me, how big it goes off in me. But what that's saying is when God starts bringing you the hard truths, and he starts speaking his word and his lightnings and his thunders, all of the sudden, everything of who he is that was before the foundations of the earth, okay? Like we've learned around here, God does not kill, right? God does not put sickness on you. There's no evil in him whatsoever, right? Like it's not his will that any should perish. He doesn't want anybody to die. Death has nothing to do with him. All of those things are who God has always been. And, we've went in here a lot. Mike's done a lot of teaching about how you read in the Old Testament. It may sound like God's doing it, but when his truths start coming, when his hard truths start coming to you, when you find out, I'm sick because of what I'm doing, or I'm dying because of what I'm doing, or there's evil in my life because of what I'm doing, all of a sudden the foundations of the earth are opened wide to you for you to see it never was God. It never was his fault. It never was his plan. He never had any hand in the evil that's in my life. And it's like, all of a sudden, the whole universe of who he is, of how big he is, of how good he is, of how awesome he is laid open before you. It's like, it's all new. It's something you've never seen before. I can remember when I first started getting the revelation of how good he was. And I can remember feeling like, this can't be true. You felt like you're going, he can't really be that good. That really can't be. My got to be thinking wrong. And yet he just kept bringing it and showing it and bringing it and showing it how good he is and the mercy that he has for people and the goodness and the kindness and how he tests with goodness and he doesn't test by evil. And like pretty soon you're like, oh my gosh, he really is this good. And then he just keeps building on that. He just keeps showing you how good he is. So once you start getting the hard truths and all those things about yourself and who we are, you also start getting the goodness and the grandness and the greatness of who he is, and that it doesn't matter how messed up we are. He took care of that so that we don't have to be that messed up anymore. Okay. And then verse 16, he reached from on high, and he took me and drew me out of many waters. He delivered me from my strong enemy and from those who hated and abhorred me, for they were too strong for me. They confronted and came upon me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my stay and support. He brought me forth also into a large place. He was delivering me because he was pleased with me and delighted in me. And that's kind of where I want to start more of my teaching into today is, and I think it's so cool that Kathy said that was in September, when we got that word, God said, mark this day, and I think it was in August because I know Larry and Jana weren't here that morning, and so I think this when they were in Colorado. So I think it was in August. Do y'all remember like a really bad praise and worship that bombed like really big time? You couldn't understand the words, like the sound system was messed up. Nobody knew two of the songs, so they couldn't sing it, and I couldn't hear I don't know if I was sick or what, but my ears were clogged up, and I couldn't hear anything, and it was like the most horrible thing. And I'm standing up there going, what is going on? Like, this is just awful. And I said this then out of my mouth. I don't know if it was for everybody, but I think it was. But that God said, get used to being uncomfortable because things are about to change. And they did change for like me, and I think for all of us at that time. Everything became bigger. And this is what I feel like is happening is, we always say new levels, new devils. Well, I'm not necessarily sure it works that way. What I think is God puts you on a playing field, and he starts teaching you how to fight the enemy. And, enemies have different levels too, right? They have ranks, and they have, there's the little peon ones that you can flick off pretty easy like this, and then there's the great big ones that you have to have nothing but the Spirit of God and none of yourself to get anything done with them. And some of them that are maybe not so big for me may be big for you, and some of them that may not be big for you may be huge for me. Then there are ones that are like huge for everybody, right? So they're all different levels, they're all different ranks, okay? So I feel like what God does is, you start out walking with God, and he starts revealing some of the little ones to you, and you start dealing with them, and you start learning how to fight them and get in his presence and give in to him, submit to him, and make those things flee. And that starts happening. Pretty soon you start getting pretty comfortable walking around in that place, Like, it's doing pretty good. Those things that used to have you all bound up, now when they try to come at you, you have authority over them because you walked through it and you fought your way through it. And then all of a sudden one day you realize, oh my gosh, I'm in a place where I have enemies that are too strong for me. And I think what happens is God said, okay, you made it this level. Now I'm going to give you a little bit harder demonic force to fight with. And so it's like, it says I'm in a large place. It's like all of a sudden everything's huge and you feel uncomfortable again. And you have enemies coming at you that you have no idea how to fight. The things that you did on the level before, you flick those little devils off. Doesn't work with these devils. They just look at you and laugh. And you're standing there like, okay, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. And so you dig into God a little deeper, and he starts showing you how to war with these things that are a little stronger. They have a little more authority in the demonic realm. And that just keeps happening and happening. And I felt like in August, that happened to us. All of a sudden, we were getting pretty comfortable. In fact, so comfortable that we got rebuked one morning with our worship because we got so comfortable that we just thought, well, we can just worship however and it's okay. And we got rebuked, and we're in a whole new level now. We're in a big place where we have enemies coming at us that are beyond anything I've ever fought before. It's like at every level, you have some hardships and you have to learn some things and whatever. But you kind of feel like you know some things from the level before. Do any of you feel like we're at a level right now where I've never looked into the face of these things before? This is like, I 100% have to rely on you, God, because everything I've ever known in the past doesn't work with these things. Everything that I thought that I knew and I understood and I know how to fight and I had authority in, they don't work with these things. They look in your eye and they laugh at you. And I'm not talking necessarily physically, somebody looking in your eye. I'm talking about you can hear them like, who do you think you are? You thought you had so much authority. You have nothing against me. And I'm totally at God's mercy. And I just love the line of this song because I think it went so well with this. And it said, I'll just read this whole page. Then you crash over me, and I've lost control, but I'm free. I'm going under. I'm in over my head, and you crash over me. That's where you want me to be. I'm going under. I'm in over my head. Whether I sink, whether I swim, it makes no difference when I'm beautifully in over my head. And I told Jana that song was playing when she came in this morning. He said, sometimes it doesn't feel beautiful when you're in over your head. But it is beautiful because it's like a bittersweet thing going on. It's like you're in a place you don't know how to do anything. It's huge. You've got enemies you've never faced before. You have nothing in your arsenal's working. It's like, you've seen a movie before where you keep shooting the guy and doing everything. He just keeps coming and coming and coming and doesn't stop him. It's like everything in my arsenal doesn't work. And it's like, God, I'm so dependent on you. That's the bitter part. But the sweet part is, you're so dependent on him. It's like he's talking all the time. It's like Scripture is more alive to you than it's ever been. It's like you can start praising and immediately his presence there. It's like there was 3 days there where it just seemed like he was just speaking nonstop for 3 days, and like everything everybody said, and you were crying and laughing and what do we call it, crafting, because you don't know anymore if you're crying or laughing or if you're happy, if you're sad. Your emotions are wild and you don't know what's going on, and it's exciting and it's devastating. And you feel alive. You feel like, God, I am doing something in the kingdom. I don't know what, but I'm alive. And I am doing something for you. And I am going to keep submitting myself. And I am going to keep coming back to you. And I am not going to let this enemy win this. And you are going to teach me. You're going to teach me how to fight at this level. And then you start getting a little worried because what's the next level going to be like? But let's not worry about that. I got to get this one conquered first, right? It's kind of like, did you guys ever play Super Mario Brothers when it first came out? And you played for hours and hours and hours, and you'd get level 1 conquered, and then you could just zoom right through it, and then you'd work on level 2 for a while, and you get it conquered, you zoom right through it. You get up in some of those higher levels, it would take you a lot more days to get through them, but once you got to a new level, you could always zoom through the other levels. Once in a while, you fell and had to go back. But most of the time, you could zoom through those levels you'd already been at. But when you got to that one you were working at, you'd have to stay there for a while. And that's all that happens. People go through this, I was so close to God, and everything was going, and I was doing so well, and now I just don't know what I'm doing. Good. You just came to a new level. God just promoted you up higher in the ranks, and he's given you something new to fight. Because when you go on and read this, which this just amazes me, how we, the religious system, and I hear us saying this sometimes too, are constantly putting ourselves down and saying what miserable worms we are and how messed up we are and how far we are away from God. When you read David, he didn't talk like that. And David messed up, right? You go read through there, you can read where he messed up. So somehow he knew something about God that we don't seem to know yet. Let me go ahead and read this to you, starting in verse 19. He brought me forth also into a large place. He was delivering me because he was pleased with me and delighted in me. The Lord rewarded me according to my rightness, according to the cleanness of my hands has he recompensed me. For I have kept the ways of the Lord and have not wickedly departed from my God. For all my ordinances were before me, and I put not away his statutes from me. I was upright before him and blameless with him, ever to keep myself free from guilt and sin. Therefore has the Lord recompensed me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands in his sight. And I just think that's so cool, he knows who his God is, and he knows the relationship he has with God. And, when he did mess up with Bathsheba and Nathan came to him, he repented. It wasn't like he was arrogant. It wasn't like he thought he was this great person that could do anything without God. But he knew who he was with God, and he knew what he had in God, and he knew what his God would do for him. And, I don't think we always know that. I don't think we always understand that. And somehow we've got in our heads that putting ourselves down somehow makes us closer to God or makes whatever. We don't have to put ourselves down. We just have to exalt him. When you exalt him, you go low. You go really low. When you're exalting him and lifting him up, you're on the floor with your face in the floor because you know how big he is and how small you are. So, we have to know who we are in him. We just have to, because he's got big things to do. And people are not going to listen to somebody that's walking around with their head down all the time saying, I'm just a mess and poor, pitiful me. What does that say about God? If we've been serving God for 20, 30 years and we're still walking around with our heads down, poor, pitiful me, I'm so messed up and my life is still such a wreck, wow, they're really going to want to run and serve your God, aren't they? If after 20 to 30 years he couldn't do anything for you, what's he going to do for me, you know? And again, I'm not saying be arrogant. I'm not saying, oh, look at me and how great I am. I'm saying look at him and how great he is. And look what he can do with a life. Look how he can turn a situation around. I am powerful and mighty because of who he is, not because of anything I've ever done. Whew. And this is who he is. With the kind and merciful, you show yourself kind and merciful. And with the upright man, you will show yourself upright. With the pure, you show yourself pure. And with the perverse, you will show yourself contrary. For you deliver an afflicted and humble people, but will bring down those with haughty looks. For you cause my lamp to be lighted and to shine. The Lord my God illumines my darkness. For by you I can run through a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. Okay, stop again. I can run through a troop. What does that mean? You got a troop of enemies. You got an army of enemies in front of you. I can run right through them. Jesus did it. They tried to throw him off a cliff, and he walked right out of it. They didn't even see him. They didn't know where he came from. I can leap over a wall. When I read this a long time ago, I saw like what is it called? The Great Wall of China? Is that what it is? That's like way tall. That's how big my God is. He can make me leap over walls that are that big. As for my God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is tested and tried. He is a shield to all those who take refuge and put their trust in him. Take refuge, get under his protection. The God who girds me with strength and makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like hinds' feet, able to stand firmly and make progress on the dangerous heights of testing and trouble. He sets me securely upon my high places. He teaches my hands to war so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. See, that's what he's doing when he takes you to all those different levels, teaching you how to war. You have also given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand has held me up. Your gentleness and condescension have made me great. You have given plenty of room for my steps under me, that my feet would not slip. And see, that's why he puts you in such a big place. Like, when you move into that next level, it seems so huge, okay? But he's given you plenty of time. He's given you lots of time to get this, to hear him, to get where his protection's at. And it's you, like, you know, people always want to say, oh, it's all in God's timing. Okay, that's true. You don't want to move ahead of him, and you don't want to move behind him. But most of the time, the reason things aren't happening is not because it's not God's timing. It's because we're not doing what he's telling us to do. But he gives us plenty of space. He's so good and he's so merciful and he's so kind that he gives you plenty of time and plenty of space. And you know what? He'll never give up on you. And you know what? You may die at step 1. You may die at step 5. God didn't give up. You didn't make it because you didn't get what he was saying to you. It's never his. He's never going to quit. He never quits. He never gets up. The door may shut in your face, but it's because you're not listening to him and you've cut yourself off from him and he can't speak to you anymore. But he never changes. That if he never changes, he's not going to tell you something and then change his mind about it next week. And almost always God is going to say, if you do this, then I'll do this. And usually I have not seen many times when there's a time limit on that. Sometimes there is because of whatever the situation may be. There might be a time limit that closes that door and then, you can't do it. But what I've seen of God for the most part is when he says, if you do this, I will do this. You can do it 20 years down the road. And if you do what he said, he'll still do what he said. And like I said, you got to be careful because there are times when, because of whatever the circumstance might be, like we've talked about, okay? If you sleep around and get pregnant, you're pretty much going to have a baby. God can't say, if you keep yourself a virgin, I'll give you the perfect husband and the perfect children, the perfect life. If you slept around and got pregnant before that, that's pretty much over. He can't do that now. But he will take what you did and give you a new. If you'll raise this child in my admonition, then he'll never depart from me, and and you'll have a good family, and they'll serve God with you and all of that kind of stuff. So even if you mess up, he'll take those and he'll make you a new promise. But I've also seen God say things to people like, if you will get rid of that forgiveness, this thing will go away. And for 20 years, they fight that and don't do that. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, they decide, I'm tired of living like this, and they forgive, and boom, he does what he says he's going to do. Now, you may have got side effects from that. You may get sick. You may have had marriages fail. You may have kids that are messed up because you did that, but he still gives you that peace in that moment when you forgive and do what he asked you to do. Everything changes because he always keeps his side of the covenant. He always does. He's a man of his word. He never promises you something and then goes back on it. Never. He will not do that. Okay, I don't remember where I'm at. I think I'm over here somewhere. No. $35. You have also given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand has held me up. Your gentleness and I already read that, and condescension have made me great. You have given plenty of room for my steps under me, that my feet should not slip. I pursued my enemies and overtook them. Neither did I turn again until they were consumed. And so I'm going to stop there for a minute because I want to do something else before we finish this out. I feel like that the level that we're on right now is pretty big, and I think it's cool that we had the internet thing today because it kind of goes along with that. All of her songs go along with like everything I feel like God's saying to us now is we have to get ourselves so grounded in this place that we're at right now that God is our protection, that no matter what we come up against, no matter what, like we pretty much still deal where we live with the little devils. You know what I'm saying? We're still worried about how cold it is or how much money we're going to have. Like, I just heard a statistic the other day that as Americans, we throw away a third of the food that we buy because we don't get it ate before it spoils. That's pretty sad when you've got other countries who are starving to death because they don't have enough food. We're dealing with some pretty small devils. We can come in here and we can worship and we don't have to worry about our lives being threatened, okay? But the scary thing is because so many people are turning their back on God, those doors are getting opened. And I want to read to you again. I read this one other time when I was up here teaching. I'm just going to read you part of it. This is a vision that Paul Keith Davis had. And it really stuck with me the first time I read it, because I know this is what's coming to America. And I don't know when the first time I read it was, 2 or 3 years ago probably we came across this. But now with the things I'm facing in my life now and the things that I'm seeing out in the world now, this is more real than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And I don't think the church, I think the church is kept itself pretty sheltered in knowing what's really going on out in the world and in people who call themselves Christians. I mean, we're pretty messed up as a nation, and we have come out from God's protection so much. He says in here, when I read this, he says, something has been lifted off of our country that has allowed these demonic things to come in. Again, I don't think that's what happened. I think God's protection is still in place over this country, but as a nation, we have stepped out from underneath of it. We have allowed things that should not be allowed. Whatever's bound on earth is bound in heaven, and bound in heaven is loosed in heaven, is loosed in earth, or however that all goes. We have allowed a lot of things. There's how many heavens? There's the demonic realm that's heavenly too. And we are the portals, did I say that right? We are the portals for the heavenly realm. So we are either allowing the demonic stuff to come through us or we're allowing the God stuff to come through us. And because we stepped out of God's place of protection, we're allowing things to manifest in our country that are causing it to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the demonic side. And I thought, you always hear that it's sex and violence, okay? It's sex and violence in movies, it's sex and violence in videos and in music and all that kind of stuff. And that's bad, okay? I'm not saying that's not bad. But it's gone way far beyond that. There is Satan worship in those things, and it's not secret anymore. It's like right there, blatant in the music, in the movies, everywhere that you go. You have little kids cursing the heavens. You have people that are doing drugs in their yard cursing God, saying, I want it to be the hardest thing ever for me to ever come back to you because I don't want anything to do with you. You've got, like, you hear that the lines between right and wrong are blurred, okay? I've heard that for years, and I always thought, like, when I was a teenager and I was being evil, I was rebellious, okay? I knew right from wrong, and I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I just wanted what I wanted. So then you start hearing the lines are getting blurred, and I always thought, well, yeah, they're just doing a lot of wrong things or whatever. They don't know right from wrong. There's no more lines. They have been so inundated. We were talking about, okay, Gianna had seen this little vision. Okay, you know how Bugs Bunny, and there's that hairy monster, and the hairy monster is chasing Bugs Bunny, and he's great big. And something happens to him. We never did find the cartoon, so we don't remember what happens to him. But something happens to him, and all of a sudden he shrinks into this little bitty thing, and he's going, and he's nothing, you know? And we were dealing with something, and she said, I just saw in the spirit. That thing is, you know, it looks like it's so big, and it's sounding so big, and it's making you fear. But really, it's just, when God speaks and says, you know, however to deal with it, it's just going to be little like that, okay? So we were trying to find that cartoon on YouTube. We were looking for it. And we found a few with the hairy monster. We never found that one. But in one of those, the hairy monster is chasing Bugs Bunny, and he's running, going, praying, okay? Bugs Bunny is praying, and all of a sudden he stops, he turns around, he sits the monster down, he starts curling his hair, and, you know, all this stuff. He gets control of the situation. That's what we were taught through cartoons. We didn't know when we were watching those cartoons that theme under that was, if you pray, you will get control of the situation. But we did. We learned right from wrong from those things. And not that they were all good and, you know, there was whatever. But it just really stuck out to me that Bugs Bunny was praying to God, and then he got control of the situation. The cartoons that are out there now, they're getting down on their knees and bowing and worshiping occult-ish things, Satan-ish things. It's not just coming through sex and violence anymore. It's out and out Satan worship. And it's everywhere. It's in the cartoons, it's in the video games, it's in the music, it's in the schools. And all their friends are doing the same thing, and half of the parents don't even know the right from wrong. They're right in the middle of it doing it too. And the lines have really been blurred between what is right and what is wrong. And God is wanting to bring that back. That's one of his places of protections. If you do this, in Deuteronomy, these are the good things that happen to you. If you do this, this is the evil that's going to come upon you, right? Those lines have gotten blurred. They don't even know. You have little kids that were born and say up to 10 years old now that don't know. All they've ever seen is this demonic stuff. They don't even know it's wrong. Nobody's ever told them it's even wrong. It's just all they've ever seen. They haven't known anything different. Nobody's ever come in and showed them who God was, who he is, what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what is God, what is not God. Like, you know, years ago, if you'd have said something about Satan worship, everybody cringed like, oh, that. And now it's just a normal part of everyday life. And we have pulled so far out from under God's protection as a country that these are the things that are happening all around us, while the church is claiming so much power and victory, and they're falling prey to all those same things. Okay, so this is the vision that he had, and he was praying one day, and he heard, as in the days of Noah, which is what caught my attention, because we teach around here a lot about as in the days of Noah, and so he started asking God what that meant. If you go back and read, I think it's in Genesis 6, he talks about, it's talking about where it calls it in the Bible the sons of God, but it was demonic things. Were having sex with humans, and they were having babies, and they were becoming giants, and that's why evil was overtaking the earth. I still don't understand all of that. I don't have the revelation of what all that means. All I know is there was a lot of demonic activity going on that shouldn't have been, and that's why there was a flood, because the evil got so out of hand, that came. So when you read in Matthew about as the days of Noah, it's more than just Noah and a flood. There was demonic stuff going on, okay? So God had spoke to him to go back and start studying that out in Genesis 6 and as the days of Noah. So he'd really been seeking God for answers in that. And one day he had a vision. And it started off, and he was in a Billy Graham crusade. And what's the song everybody says? That come as you are, just as you are. Just as I am, okay. And that song was playing, and you had all the lines of people going up to say their confession and get saved, okay? And then it switched from that, and then he was in a scene where there was a church, and there was people mangled, mangled legs. The guy had a big growth on his side, all kinds of deformities on these people. But they were all up front to get prayer, and they were all excited that God was going to come and do something. And see, that's where we've been living, is there are a lot of people, there are a lot of churches now. It's not weird anymore to see a lot of people come into a service and expect to get healed. Now, maybe they don't, but the expectation level is way higher than it used to be, right? And it's more acceptable when you say God heals today than it was even 10 years, 15 years ago when I started serving God. And so he went to that scene. And then this is where I'm going to start reading. They're in that scene, and it says, I actually felt encouragement from this scene derived from the faith that permeated the atmosphere. These people were here because of the expectation and anticipation of God's presence to heal and deliver. Suddenly, with that realization, the double doors of the sanctuary burst open, and a family of approximately 10 people came through the doors, escorting what appeared to be a young girl that was clearly demonized. I watched as she was screaming, cursing, and throwing grown men around like rag dolls. Okay? This is not as simple as do your chores. If you're good, I'll do this. If you're bad, I'll do this. Those demons don't respond to that kind of stuff. They're beyond that. They will spit on you. They will bite you. They will hit you. They will curse at you. They will throw grown men around like rag dolls. And you two can testify to some of that, and Joe, where you guys worked, that girl, James came on one time and said this girl was throwing him and some other guys around like rag dolls. Those things, you can't reason with them. You can't talk to their sense of logic and say, now you're going to have to stop doing this or you're not getting supper. They spit on you when you say that. That does not work with these things, okay? Then one of the men in the family spoke with a very demanding tone, saying, somebody had better be here that can deal with this. With that statement, I could sense the family's desperation for God's intervention. They had tried every other alternative possible with no success. Only the power and authority of Christ could help this family. And that's what you see too. When you start looking into all the mental illnesses that people have, all of the sicknesses and going to the hospitals that people have, all the marriage problems that people have, all of the children problems that people have, all of the money problems that people have, all of the godless lives that people have, and they have went everywhere and they have tried everything. They have spent all of their money, they have spent all of their time, they have spent all of their energy, they have spent all of their resources, and nothing worked. They've even went to church. They've went to church, and even the church cannot help them because only the power and authority of Christ is going to be able to do anything with the things that we're dealing with. And it's going to get worse, okay? It's going to get worse. And there's going to be, like Kathy's always talked about, there's going to be that greater distinction between God's people and the demonic. That's what it is. They are serving Satan, and the more they serve Satan, the bigger and bigger and bigger this gets. But the church is growing too. This is not a sad thing. This is to show us where we're at in this fight, okay? God is bigger than that. God is bigger than all of this. We said that from the very beginning. He's able to save, right? He's bigger than all of this. But his people are going to have to submit to him and get under his protection. And we're going to have to learn how to fight on these levels and fight these things that we're fighting, because those people are, when it gets bad enough out there, they're going to be breaking down the doors. If they start getting wind that there's some place that knows how to deal with these things, because that's what they did to Jesus. That's what they were dealing with. You've heard Pastor Steve talk so many times about the woman with I think it was the one with the issue of blood, or the one that was bent over, whichever one. She was a daughter of Abraham. She'd been in the church her whole life, and she had dealt with this for 18 years. And Pastor Steve always says, how did those demons get in the church? They're in the church. They're everywhere. And when they got wind that there was somebody in town that could speak to these things and they would leave, he was thronged everywhere he went. Okay, so if we ever grab a hold of this and start doing what we're supposed to be doing and getting under his authority like we're supposed to be, and they are so distraught and they have spent every last cent that they have and every bit of energy that they have, and they're wore out and beaten down and they've done everything there is to do, and they get wind that there's a place that knows how to deal with this stuff, they'll come. They'll want it. As the family made their way up the aisle, I walked towards them with the profound awareness that there was no time to call for a host of intercessors, nor was there time to pray and fast. It was like a Mount Carmel showdown between light and darkness, requiring that we call upon God's grace and manifest presence resident in us to meet this incredible need. I was immediately reminded of the Lord's confrontation with the demoniac at Gadara. I was also thoroughly convinced that a mere spiritual gift, as wonderful as spiritual gifts may be, was not sufficient to overcome this level of darkness. It required Christ in me, the hope of glory. I love that line. It required, we cannot do this in our own strength. We cannot do this in our own strength. It is more crucial than ever that we are relying on him, that we're taking time, like, I'm finding this in my own self. I'm relying on what God has said. You know, we've learned in here so many times, religious system relies on what God has said, what he did in the past. We have to hear, what is he saying now? Because what he has said to the things that we were fighting in the past is not going to work with the darkness that we're going to be facing, or that we are facing right now. As I walked toward the family, my spiritual eyes were open to the experience, and I could see an evil being occupying the young girl that seemed to be approximately 12 feet tall. It was then I remembered my study concerning Genesis 6 and the Lord's admonition that the day of his coming would be just as it was in the days of Noah. I knew that I was dealing with a being in the spirit realm that had its origin in Genesis 6. What overcame Noah's day in the natural, we must overcome in the spirit. Suddenly, a realm of authority rose up within me that I knew transcended present understanding of spiritual authority. Out of my mouth, the words, "Be gone," proceeded with great power and authority. As quickly as the words were spoken, the spirit left the young girl. Of course, I realized this was a teaching experience to illustrate the authority we must aspire to and demonstrate in this generation to meet the great demands and level of darkness that will define the final days before the Lord's return. It is the realm of Christ's authority that the bride must now come to know in fullness in order to gather the great harvest. As soon as the evil being left the young girl, the entire family came under the spirit of the conviction and gave their lives to the Lord. Then I heard the voice speaking again, saying, "What has previously been relegated to India and Africa is coming to America, and somebody had better get authority with me, and in a hurry." I knew that I had seen a spiritual confrontation that is commonplace with ministry in Africa and India. Some form of restraining force had been removed from our country. And again, I don't think God removed it. It's we, as a country, have come out from under his protection, and that has allowed these things to come into our country. And you know, those things are as simple as we don't allow prayer, but we allow people to pray to other gods. You can't speak of your relationship with Christ without getting ridiculed, and that scares people, so they stop doing it. And yet we're allowing worship of other gods, idols, and those kind of things. We're allowing that in our country. We're like, Sundays have become, which I know Sunday's not the only day you worship God, but You know, when I was a kid, you went out on a Sunday, it was pretty much dead. There was nobody in the streets. There was no cars. There was no businesses open. And like now, it means nothing to people. There's no day of worship for the God set aside for him, which I know our whole life, it's beyond that. Our whole lives have to be his. But just that just shows where we are as a country, that, you know, even that, how far down that has become on a priority list, you know? Some form of restraining force has been removed from our country that has sheltered us from this realm and dimension of spiritual darkness on a broad basis. It has been seen in isolated areas and circumstances, but not as widespread as we are about to witness. We must prepare now to meet this incredible challenge. This level of hostile opposition will require the Lord's bride to enter a level of maturity belonging to the fullness of Christ, an absolute demonstration of the Lord's victory over death, hell, and the grave. Like, this is huge. This is huge. This is so much bigger than, God, I want you to give me a little money, heal my body, and make my family okay, right? We are trying to implement his victory over death, hell, and the grave. You know, he already defeated all of these things. He's now waiting for us to put them under his feet. That's what we're supposed to be doing here, is putting this stuff under his feet. And you know what? If we're still dealing with the little bitty devils that are this easy to get rid of, and we can't get rid of them yet, we have nothing to give these people who come with this stuff. And these things are scary when you first come up against them. Like, you don't know what's going on. Like, things you used to do don't work. And you're like, okay, God, what now? It's Christ in me, the hope of glory. I am never going to have in myself the ability to take those things on. It's only going to be completely submitted to him, completely doing what he's saying to do. And it's going to be crucial because we're getting into a place where the enemy is starting to notice. So you make one step out from that light, and where it used to be 20 things jump on you, it now may be 100. You get to the next level, it may be 1,000. You get to the next level, it may be 10,000. That's why it says to be a teacher, you're under more accountability. I don't know that that necessarily means you're a teacher like you stand up here like I am. It means when you start teaching the things of God out of your life by speaking to people and doing things, those devils watch that. They see where you have power and authority with things. And when you step out from his light, you step out from under his protection, they're going to do everything they can to take you out because they don't want to see him get any power back in his people. Okay, so I just wanted to finish this out. Verse 37, which I think I already read it. But, like, I just think this is so cool because this is what, as I read this, I'm going to read clear to the end now. This is what God is promising to us as Revelation Light. It's what he's promising to his church as a whole. If we will stay under his protection and do what he's saying, this is what's going to happen to these demonic things that we're starting to see take control of stuff. I pursued my enemies and overtook them. Neither did I turn till they were consumed. Okay, there's a clue. You can't quit because it gets hard. James and I have been talking about God showing how good he is and how showing us how to overcome even when there's obstacles in our life. And I saw the other day, like, I don't know if you call it a vision. I just saw like a guy in front of a whole bunch of hurdles, and he's getting ready to run the hurdles, and he gets to the first one, and he stops, and he looks at it, and he like grabs it, and he tries to pull it out of the way, and then he runs to the next one. Okay, and he's doing this because we think, and we've been told, and we've been taught that when you come serve God, everything is going to be great. Your breakthrough's right around the corner. It's going to be easy. Your life's going to get good. All the money's going to come to you. Your marriage is going to get fixed. Your kids are going to get fixed. Your health's going to get fixed. Everything's going to be great. And then you're running along that race, and all of a sudden you come to that hurdle like, this is not supposed to be here. They told me there wasn't going to be any hurdles in this race. And so we're trying so hard to get those hurdles out of the way, and we're fighting with the hurdles and fighting with the hurdles and fighting with the hurdles. And here's the guy next to you running with God. There's a hurdle. Over it. Run. Over it. Run. He's at the finish line. You're still back here messing with the hurdle 1 and 2, okay? Yeah. So you don't give up, okay? When you come to the hurdle, the first time you try to jump it might be too high. But they don't give up. Those Olympians don't give up. They keep going and keep going until they get it. I smote them so that they were unable to rise, and they fell wounded under my feet. Oh, aren't you so excited for the day when you can speak to a demonic thing and you watch it fall wounded under your feet? For you have girded me with strength for the battle. You have subdued under me and caused to bow down those who rose up against me. You have also made my enemies turn their backs to me, that I might cut off those who hate me. They cried for help, but there was none to deliver, even unto the Lord, but he answered them not. Then I beat them small as dust into the wind. I emptied them out as dirt and mire in the streets. This is not people, this is demonic stuff. You have delivered me from the strivings of the people. You have made me the head of nations. A people I had not known served me. See, we haven't necessarily in our generation, because most of us are older here, haven't had to deal with as much of the kind of stuff that I've been talking about. Like, the serving God, or the serving Satan, the bowing to Satan, the occultish stuff, the cutting your arms, the suicides, all those kind of things that's pretty commonplace to teenagers nowadays. Like the rehab places don't even bat an eye when you tell somebody that they've cut themselves. It's like, oh, well, I don't have room for them because we already have 25 other people in here that did the same thing, so you're just going to have to wait till next month. Like, it's really commonplace for that kind of stuff to happen. So these kind of enemies that we didn't know that much about in our day are going to serve us. As soon as they heard of me, they obeyed me. Again, can you imagine the day when we can speak to those things and they have to obey us? Foreigners submitted themselves cringingly and yield feigned obedience to me. See, they didn't do it happily. And I think the scripture you just read said something about cringingly too. I caught that. It's like they're not just going to go, oh, yay, we'll do what you say. They're going to cringe and they're going to fight, and they're not going to like that you have power and control over them. Foreigners lost heart and came trembling out of their caves and strongholds. They've been in caves and strongholds. They've been hidden, but they're going to be exposed. Nothing that's kept in the darkness, it's all going to be exposed. They're going to be seen. The Lord lives. Blessed be my rock, and let the Lord of my salvation be exalted. The God who avenges me and subdues people under me, who delivers me from my enemies. Yes, you lift me up above those who rise up against me. You deliver me from the van of violence. Therefore I will give thanks and extol you, O Lord, among the nations, and sing praises to your name. Great deliverance and triumphs give he to his king, and he shows mercy and steadfast love to his anointed, to David and his offspring. Father God, we just honor you, we bless you, we exalt you, we lift your name on high, God. Father God, we declare right now, God, in the presence of our enemies, that God, you are able to do these things in us, God. That Father God, we recognize that you've put us up to a higher level, God, that we're coming up against things that they're too strong for us, God. We admit that they're too strong for us. We admit that we do not know how to fight these things, God. But Father God, we look into the face of the one that we love, the one that we know holds all things in his hands, the one that has already subdued and overcome and has victory over the enemy. That Father God, you know, you have the words. You have the words of truth and life. You have the words of deliverance. You have the words to put these things under our feet as your body. You have the words to rid the world of these enemies, God. So, Father God, though we know not what to do, our eyes are on you, God. Our eyes are totally on you, God. Again, I see that army that Kathy saw several years ago, that their focus is totally on you, that we don't look to the left, we don't look to the right, we don't get pulled off over here, we don't get pulled off over there. That, Father God, our eyes are totally on you, God. Totally on you, God. You're calling the shots because they're too strong for us. We have no idea how to battle these things. We have no idea where to go from here. We only know that in you, we're saved from all of our enemies. All of our enemies. All. There's nothing in you right now that God can't save you from. There's nothing around you. There's nothing any enemy can do to you. I don't care where you live. I don't care what you're facing. God is bigger. Find his place of protection. Find what he's saying in this hour and live under that place. And watch the salvation of the Lord before your eyes. Watch him do mighty things in your presence. Watch him use you. Watch him use you to speak life, to speak deliverance, to speak the kingdom of God into this earth. Watch him use you to do it. Watch the salvation of the Lord. Them, you, and the camera. You find your place of protection. You're not dealing with the same enemies that we're dealing with. You're thinking right now, these things are way bigger than I have any idea of. You're right. I haven't dealt with what you've dealt with. I haven't dealt with the things that David dealt with in this. I have not seen those kind of enemies that you're facing, but God has. He's been there and he's defeated them for you. He's put them in a place where they can be under your authority. If you get under his authority, you find that place of protection where he has for you. You go get yourself in peace and quiet, and you listen for the voice of the Lord, and you let him speak his words of life to you and his words of deliverance to you, and his plan for you to go and deliver your country and your people and the things that are going on in your life, because he's bigger than anything the enemy's throwing at you, any lie or any fear that he's telling you. He's bigger than that. God is bigger than that. And he has a way of escape in every situation. I don't care how bad it looks. He has that way of escape for you. You go find what he's saying to you. Get in peace and find what he's saying to you. And then you live under that place of what he said. And you watch the salvation of the Lord. And then you email us and tell Jana, we want to know. We want to know your victory stories that God's done for you. Thank you, God. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, you can do questions now if you have any. Nobody?